Colleagues, and welcome to day two. It's my pleasure to introduce the panels today. That is, if I can read the notes because it's so dark up here, so we could just do with a tad more light, if you would please. Thank you very much. No, a tad more light. I don't have X-ray vision, so could the lighting crew arrange for a few more lights to be put on the stage, please? I will introduce the panel in a moment, I promise you. But first of all, can I say thank you very much to our colleagues from last night. The reception at the British Council in India was most impressive, so my thanks to the India team. Also, thanks to our colleague from Afghanistan for that marvelous film. I don't know what you thought, but I thought it was profoundly moving, so we were really delighted by that. Today we're going to be looking at dimensions from the research on terms of women, higher education and leadership. And one of the things that we want to look at are some of the particular challenges that have emerged. And once again, I will make my request that could we have more lighting on the stage, please? Come on guys, it's not that challenging. Okay, it's still dark up here. In fact, it's getting darker, you know. Now, I don't need more light in my eyes, I need more light on the stage, actually. So I'm going to try and introduce our panel. When I say try, it'll be challenging because it's hard to read the notes. I'm really delighted that we have with us from Indonesia, Professor Kanawata, who is a well-known professor and academic, receipt of numerous awards, including awards from the World Bank. She is an expert in the field of geological engineering, and is currently working as the first female rector of the university. She is a distinguished academic in her own right in Indonesia and in South Asia, and she will be making our keynote speech this morning. We're also joined on the panel by Dr. Nafis Mahi, who was recently head of science at the Department of Energy and Climate Change. He's been educated in Manchester, Toronto, London, and Cambridge, and obviously epitomizes the globalization of education personally. He was part of the Chief Scientist Group in the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, has worked on areas of climate change, thank you very much, nutrition, and is a key worker in India. We're joined also by Lynn Heslop. Lynn Heslop was the Regional Director for Education in South Asia until recently, and now is the Regional Education Advisor in India, specializing in our work in India. All of these colleagues will be responding to challenges from the floor and challenges from me. But without further ado, I'm going to invite Dr. Kanawata to make her presentation. Thank you very much, Dr. Kanawata.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, allow me to express my gratitude thanks to British Council, which has been very keen to invite me to give this keynote speech. And it was about 20 years ago. It was in 1991 till 1996. I was also did the master and doctoral studies in Leeds University, UK, and British Council was also helping me, supporting me. Although the scholarship was from the World Bank, but it was administered by the British Council. So again, thanks for that. And what I'm going to start now is showing what I'm doing as the researcher in disaster risk reduction. And this program, actually the continuation of my study in UK. So after 20 years from my study, now I managed to conduct interdisciplinary research, which also involve women, and we work together, male and female, in order to build the resiliency of the country from the disaster. So please have a look this video showing how we develop the indigenous technology combined with digital technology for the landslide early warning system, and the video will show how we empower the community in the village to manage the system, the technology by themselves, and how to respond from the early warning. And this is just the exercise for the community to build their resilience from the landslide disasters. Okay, let me start this. So that's the village, which is very prone for the landslides, and the situation of the village. And this is the indigenous technology. Later on will be combined with the last technology for the early warning system. And this is the situation of the land. This is the indigenous technology that we utilize to help the people. Women always the main victims of the disasters. The students work together with the community to build up the disaster mitigation system. They work together. So the students work for 2 months in the village with the community to build up the technology and the system and to empower them. Those are the local people as the task force for disaster mitigation. Those are the tools. Those are 30 students working together with the community, male and female, children and the senior, in order to build up the resilience of the village. So these are of the illustration about what I'm doing after I completing my study 20 years ago from Leeds University, UK. So we call this as the socio-technical approach for the community-based disaster mitigation. And I would like to continue this by showing my presentation. Okay, fine. PowerPoint. Yes, oh, sorry, go up. The first slide. Can I do by myself? Yeah. Okay, I'll do myself. Yes. Yes, yes, I know. Well, Women and Leadership, the Absent Revolution. And this presentation showing how we as the women doing the effort how to take the lead for the need of our nation, but also still being very close with the community, because normally people think the university always not really close to the society, but I would like to show how we take the lead to combine the power of society and the university through the community-based research, but also still maintain our family life. And this is, I'm a geologist, so again, this is my life as the geologist. I used to work with the soil, with the rocks, but the challenge, how to implement the knowledge of soil and rocks in order to protect our environment and to protect the human life. So I used to work with man, because as the engineer, it is the man life. But luckily, so far, they respect me a lot, and they listen to me, and they're really willing to work together with me. And this also, I have a dream that my students, as the future leaders, they must work side by side, male and female, in order to save the earth from these disasters. Like we can see here, the volcanic eruption, Indonesia having 128 active volcanoes. And my university, exactly at the slope of the volcano, within the distance of 20 kilometers. And it's frequently suffered from the eruption. So when the eruption will come, we were evacuated, but then after safe, we came back to study again. So we adapt to the situation from hitting and running, hit and run, hit and run. So that's why we do need the technology to help us when we have to start to run at the accurate time. So this is what I'm doing. And look at this picture in the corner. This is the life when the life in Indonesia when we struck by the tsunami. Everybody run, and you can see how the senior female and the women trying to save the life of their children. They are panicking. They were panicking. They were struggling because of the disaster. So that's why it is my intention how to empower the community, especially the lady, the center of the community, to be survived from the disaster. And I always saying, happiness is the journey, not the destinations. Although we are living in the dangerous area, we have to keep our spirit, our motivation ongoing. I always saying that to my children, because one of my child have ever said, "Mom, let us go, live somewhere, we stay somewhere else, not in Indonesia. I'm panicking. I cannot sleep, always with the disaster." But I keep saying, don't worry. We have to stay here, but we have to manage that. That's why the research and technology is needed. So this is, I'm trying to show the happiness in between the disaster. This is my family, and you know, he's the president of Republic Indonesia, and actually he graduated from my university. So now he becomes like a family. He frequently visits my university as the alumni. And our mission is to support him as the president, to be vice president, to be the president of the people, because he's graduated from the University of the People. And she's my mother. She's always keep motivating me to move forward. And I always keep motivating our students to be optimists, to be brave as the future leader. And she's our close friend. Perhaps any one of you know her. She's the sister of Barack Obama. His father is Indonesian, and we work together as well for the disaster risk reduction and resilience. And actually, I'm so lucky that in the 19th century, we have the female hero, Sis Kartini. She's the hero of women emancipation. Because of her, women can go to school, can do the study, and we can be like, and I can stand up here now because of her. It was in the century, in 19th century. And she's also another female hero. She's battle for independence. So it's different types of hero. Kartini was battle for having opportunity to learn, to study at school, but Cut Nyak Dien is from Banda Aceh. She's battle for the independence, for the liberty. And she's another hero. In 1980s, she's the first female astronaut, the first astronaut from Indonesia, and she's a female, a medical doctor. So she's also our hero. And this is the first female president in Indonesia, Megawati Soekarno Putri. So I'm the followers of them to work to protect our nation, to be survived from disasters and global problems. And recently, our new cabinet, we have 8 female ministers. It is the largest numbers among how many ministers we have? 30. It's about 33. We have 33 ministers, 8 of them are the female, and it is the largest numbers in the history of Indonesia. And my responsibility as the leader in higher education, I'm working as the rector of Universitas Gadjah Mada. It has 18 faculties with 5 clusters in agriculture, humanities, engineering, natural science, health science, and also we have graduate and vocational schools. We have 55,000 students, and now we have about 2,000 international students and 5,000 employees. But we face this problem. The critical problem is the environment safety, human survivability, how to be survived from the natural disasters as well as from the environment problem. And we are dreaming to have society which is resilient. So the challenge is how we can nurture the resilience future leaders. So we educate the young people to be resilient and wise future leaders. And these are the root problems in my country. I think we have quite serious ignorance of the values of indigenous knowledge, belief, and wisdom. And also lack of recognition and respect on diversity, which then create the problems, either environmental or social problems or political problems. But now it is getting better and better, but we still need to fight, we still need to work more to keep our dream alive, to have resilient society. And our battle is through research and learning activities with the main target groups, the young students. They have to be motivated, encouraged, to be optimistic to see Indonesia in future as one emerging ASEAN country through the research, through the community services. And again, we encourage in the way we encourage the students for team-based, creative and innovative competition. Some of our students have become the champion of the global competition in robotic, in automotive, as well as in a social debate. One of the prime program in our university is the community services. As I show you in the video, those are one of the prime program in community service. It is compulsory program for the students to work together with the community 2 up to 3 months in order to empower the community to be the resilient society. These are the illustration. And luckily last year I was invited as the only female moderator for the presidential debate. And in the debate we discussed about the socio-cultural economic conditions which suffer from the gap, a serious gap in the social gap. And that's why our president now have the main mission to start to build Indonesia starting from the villages. So we have to build our nation starting from the villages, and by linkage of education, community, government, and industry. And this is the example of our research, always involving the female. We need the female in order to maintain the spirit of the research and to make the research become more realistic. Normally, I'm sorry to say this, the male tend to be with numerical thoughts, but then we say, how come the community and the village understand what you are saying? We have to transfer your numerical mathematical thoughts as the simple language, the simple instruments. So we are combining the numerical, the computing, the mathematical thoughts with the social thoughts. And then we managed to develop the community-based technology by empowering the local people to apply that to save their life. So my responsibility is nurturing female leaders in disaster risk reduction through the community empowerment like public education and encouragement, public awareness and risk reduction, and integrating the local wisdom and community-based technology. So this is a quick look of the activity with the female, with the children. Female is very important, again, to keep the spirit and to make all become realistic. And this is the way how female try to transfer the mathematical language into simple caricature and simple knowledge. So I think this is the technology that we develop, community-based, and this is how we educate the public through generations, starting from the kid in the garden. So the conclusion or the lesson learned is, yes, we are women, we have the soft power which is needed by our nation for the human survivability, environmental sustainability, and the national sovereignty and dignity. So the women's soft power is quite strong, is very strong, because we are having strong capacity for listening and for detailed observation with empathy. We also have quite a tough communication skill, solid team working, and tolerance, flexible, adaptable, and we are quite skillful to prepare the risk solution, and all of us mostly are resilient. And this is the final thanks from me. It was the picture of me and my husband in the One magazine, which explaining that I have an important mission to save the young leader to be creative, innovative for our future nation. Thank you very much.
So, do we have the sound system back on? Yes, we do. And can we have the stage lights back on, please, colleagues? Stage lights, guys. So, one of the things that we've been looking at is the issue about women, leadership, and progression. And one of the dimensions that Dr. Kanawata was talking about is that sense of empowerment, that sense of development. But from Louise's discussion yesterday, we know that certain things are happening in higher education. And the things that are happening in higher education are to do with the way that higher education is being seen as a business, the commoditization of higher education, the particular styles of leadership and training that are coming with higher education, almost a macho, semi-industrial culture. What we've done is commissioned some research from the Economist Intelligence Unit to look at a particular challenge that has emerged. And we've seen three things that are really emerging. One is women are being stripped out of the higher education system. So, for example, we see that currently in South Asia, female enrollment to tertiary education is cruising at around 40%. It's a breakthrough moment. So we've seen that in the last 8 to 10 years, there's been a massive increase in female enrollment. So you would think, therefore, that the routes of progression are really just opening up. So in Pakistan, India, Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, all above 40%. The only country in the region below that threshold is Afghanistan, for the reasons we've heard, but still excellent results at 24%. So that's good. The next stage is women going from graduates to PhD research. And fascinating, in India, almost 50% of the PhDs are being taken by women. And across South Asia, the figures for female PhD research are cruising at about 35%. So you'd be saying, once again, here is the second breakthrough moment. But this is where we come to the second issue. Women may be doing PhDs, they're just not going on to be researchers. There is a massive constriction at the researcher level. So, bearing in mind 40+% for enrollment, 50+ in India for PhD research, here is the data for the number of female researchers by country. In Pakistan, it goes down from 46% to 21% female researchers. In India, 23%, Nepal, 19%, Bangladesh crashes at 15%, and Afghanistan, 12%. Somewhere, there is a major issue. So we're seeing women in terms of enrollment, we're seeing PhDs, but they don't go on to doing the research. And because they don't go on to being researchers, of course, that next route of progression, that next ceiling is not being broken through. Not only is the volume not there, worst of all, of course, is some of the things that Louise was implying yesterday, is it's where they go. Because what we're seeing is the majority of female researchers work in what we'd call the social sciences, the soft sciences. So they're in the arts and humanities. They're in biotechnology. They're in social science and health. They cruise at about 25% there. They are no more than 10 to 15% of the researchers in physics, maths, earth sciences. So what we're seeing is this duality of female researchers not moving through, and when they do occur in that area, they're being dominated by the soft sciences, the social sciences. And that's also being replicated in terms of the number of articles being published by females. So there is a crucial area of blockage at the issue of the female researcher. So where have they all gone? We've heard some of the reasons yesterday around family pressure, peer pressure, institutional pressure. And the third issue that emerges from this is, of course, the issue of mobility. As female researchers simply coalesce around the social sciences, the numbers aren't as significant, the networks for influence and the ability to be mobile and to take part in international research is limited. The funding follows STEM. We know that in most of our research, which means, therefore, women having access to funding networks is severely limited. So what we've seen is there is a major barrier for us at the issue of the female researcher. And some of the evidence shows that these things are missing. What's missing is a leadership program for women. Whilst there are some examples individually of good practice in universities, there are not national programs that support the leadership of women at researcher level. And this is something that's acting as a significant barrier. The second thing is the absence of mentorship, and this was mentioned again yesterday. And many women interviewed in our research showed that what they really needed was good role models and mentorship. But we're dealing with the curious case of the missing female researcher. The third thing that emerged was the need for strong voices at the highest level. We need to see policy interventions from government, from vice-chancellors that advocate either quotas, either support systems, but that advocate for the need to actually harness the talent pool. Because the simple reality is that as long as we deny access to female researchers, what we're doing is self-replicating the system and making sure we're not harvesting the best talent pool across South Asia. And the final element that emerged in terms of ways forward is that we need to make sure that if we want to survive in terms of academic competition, then we harness a talent pool that is based upon equity and opportunity, that looks to the medium term and does not look to short-term gains. These are some of the evidence that emerged from our research that gives a real challenge to us in South Asia. Bearing in mind that South Asia will have another 700 universities, will this enhance the opportunity for the talent pool and female researchers, or will it not? And so I'm now going to ask my panel this question. Nafis, I was going to start off with you because you were looking relaxed. And the question I was going to ask you is, where are the female researchers? What's happening to them? And what's your perspective on this issue?
I think I'm able to comment on the UK situation, not so much on the situation in South Asia. But the situation in the UK is that it's changing. The kinds of issues that were discussed yesterday, the kinds of issues that you've just raised from the analysis that you've commissioned have been true and were true, and still to an extent are true in the UK. But it's a very dynamic situation. So one of the things that is happening in the UK is that the government is proactively engaging in encouraging gender equality. So there's a number of organizations and institutions that have been set up or are developing policies in this area. So for example, the Women in Science and Engineering initiative, which is an organization set up by the UK government. Its predecessor, the UK Resource Centre for Women in Science. Again, it's got a brilliant website if people want to look at it. So it provides support for women in science, mentoring, the kinds of things that you were talking about, supporting networks. One of the things that I wanted to mention is that it's developed a cultural analysis tool to enable institutions to mainstream gender equality. So there are a number of things that are happening in the UK that is enabling that change. Now, I work in the research councils. If I could take in just a moment to say what and who are the research councils. The research councils fund most of the research at universities in the UK. We have a budget of about £3 billion a year, fund the 7 institutions, the 7 individual research councils that come together under the umbrella of Research Councils UK. So those 7 are arts and humanities, social sciences, economics and social science, biotechnology, engineering, physical, medical, and Science Technology Facilities Council. Up until last year, all the chief executives were men. I'm very pleased to say 2 appointments were made last year, so now there are 2 female chief executives of the research councils. And one of those, Jackie Hunter, Professor Jackie Hunter, for BBSRC, is very, very committed to supporting women into leadership roles, both in the UK but also abroad. And she was here last year as part of a delegation, a Science and Innovation Council delegation, where our minister came to speak to his Indian equivalent. One of the good things about that delegation was that we had several very senior women. So there was Dame Nancy Rothwell, Vice Chancellor of Manchester University, Julie Maxton, the Executive Director of Royal Society, and the 2 chief executives. So half the delegation were senior women. Okay. So it is changing, and changing quite rapidly in the UK. But I want to emphasize that it's important to have that proactive policy from the government, essentially, to push it forward.
Cool. Lynn, can I ask you about South Asia? Given what we said about female researchers, because there you've got this big push, we get them undergraduate, they graduate, you get them to PhD, and then it falls off the cliff. What's your take on this? What are the issues? Why is that happening?
Well, I think, is that working? Yes. I think that there are multi-dimensional issues at play here, and I think that it's quite difficult to sort of paint a sort of picture right across South Asia, because I think different countries have different issues. For example, here in India, in terms of faculty, there's a 35 to 40% absence of faculty. Those positions are unfilled in Indian universities. That's not necessarily to do with the gender gap, it's to do with more a sort of political issue. However, I think that there are several factors which result in a lack of women going into research careers. One of them is that I think that the research ecosystems themselves in quite a lot of our countries are not as strong as they can be. If you compare the number of researchers, the number of PhDs, male or female, going from the completion of their PhD into a career of research, it's very, very low if you compare it to, for example, China or Brazil or some of the other growing economies. So one, I think that is a barrier to both men and women. But also, I think that there is therefore a huge amount of competition. If you want to go into a research career, there's a lot more competition here in our countries than there are around the world. And where are those research positions based? I think mobility is a really key thing here, because where you've got institutions scattered across our countries and our regions, sort of the elite institutions, the top tier institutions, which are doing most of the research, is very highly concentrated in a relatively few institutions, actually. So when you've got that mobility added into the mix and the problems that women face moving away into those research careers, I suspect that that's also adding to the decisions that women make and the opportunities that they have when they finish their PhDs. But, I mean, I welcome we have a lot of women researchers out here and women who've been through university and perhaps gone through PhDs. And so I think that we'll get a lot more insight into some of these reasons from personal experience here in the audience. But I also think that we also have to think within a university, what do women do? It seems to me that there isn't so much a lack of, I was talking to some people yesterday, there isn't so much a lack of women staying on at university, but perhaps they're going into teaching in university and don't have a research remit within their job. And I think a lot of universities in South Asia are teaching institutions. A lot of universities don't do significant amounts of research except for one or two departments, perhaps. And within state universities, government-funded universities, again, I think the research is concentrated. They may have stellar research departments, but that's not evenly spread across the institution. And generally speaking, when you've got a massification of a system, you concentrate on your teaching because you have to cope with the numbers of students coming through. And I think there are a lot of women going into teaching, but not into research careers.
So are you sort of suggesting that basically that combination of massification and a teaching approach is, if you like, making the problem even worse, because not only are women not getting through, they're being diverted into those areas rather than going through the research networks?
I think in a way, but I also think combined with the problems with the research ecosystem, where you're getting a much further differentiation between teaching and research, and the lack of research opportunities and therefore more competition for research places.
Well, we're going to ask the researchers in a moment, but let me just come to Dr. Kanawata. In Indonesia, do you feel that progression for women from PhD into research, do you think that's going well? Do you think there are major challenges? What's your perspective from Indonesia? You'll need to use the mic.
Well, in Indonesia, it's more similar like what she mentioned, that regardless numbers of limited female conducting the research, in fact, the research budget in our country is very low. According to the statistic, our research budget is only 0.08% of our GDP. So you can see how low our concern for the research. And also, most of the university in Indonesia is the teaching university. So we almost have no research university. It is very limited numbers for the research university. So that's the background. And according to the data we have in our university, we have the students more girls than boys. So we have 50,000 students and 28,000 more are girls, and the boys is only 26,000. However, that's for undergraduate. Yeah. But then for the doctoral program, the men is 1,035 students, the men, and the women is only 740 students. So you can see that it seems research is typical for male profession. Yes. Regardless that the research facility in our country is also very, very low. However, learning from that situation, we who are the limited numbers of female researchers, like in engineering, we have 45 professors. In our university, 45 professors in engineering. The female is only 5. So 40 are male. Yeah. So we have strategic thoughts. Now we don't care about our minimum numbers, but we have to find the male must think more feminine in the research. For instance, in engineering research, as I mentioned before, the male always consider about hard things, hard skills, numerical things, mathematical things. But then female give the touch for social humanity touch. Yeah. Although I'm engineering, I'm female engineers, but I encourage the men make more human engineering. Sure. That's the female touch. Okay. So this is our strategy now with our limited numbers. Yeah. And in fact, it is very interesting figures. In my university, we have board of trustee, and we have 21 board of trustee members, 21 members, board of trustee. Among those, only 2 female. But in the last election for the rector, the 2 female managed to make all male elect the female rector. Yep. So you see, the numbers is so minimum, but the power is quite significant. And now we just managed to create the lactation room in our university. And you know who has the idea for that lactation room? Is the male. Yep. Not the female. So that's the illustration in our
Thank you so much. I mean, interestingly enough, though, when you look at the data for Europe, we may think that we're doing well here. And Nafas has been talking about the UK, but there are 42% of UK academic staff are female, but only 17% reach the most senior research grades. And interestingly, in the US, women make up only 21% of science professors and only 5% of engineering professors. So there are issues around the globe. That's not just a South Asian issue. But can I just come back to the panel and let me ask you this question. Is the challenge we're facing an issue of governance, and should we be having quotas? Lynn, is it a governance issue, and what do you think about quotas? Should we have quotas for vice-chancellors, quotas for senior researchers? Because we've heard some stuff from this yesterday. What's your view on this?
I think it is a governance issue, and I think it's a governance issue that stretches right from sort of, department and institutional level right through to sort of state and national level. Because, to tackle some of these problems, lack of research funding, sort of women going into arts, humanities and social sciences where the funding isn't being placed, and the funding's being placed in STEM subjects for well-articulated reasons in terms of national economies, etc. is leading to vast discrepancies. I believe that quotas are probably, I mean, this is a personal view, and I think it does feel like a very sort of individual opinion when it comes to quotas, because I do believe that quotas are necessary to affect the change in the short to medium term. Because waiting for changes to happen, even though there might be sort of national initiatives, I think national initiatives are very important. But I think where the sort of the barriers and the enablers, there's such a difference between the barriers and enablers, and the barriers are fairly insurmountable in some instances. I do think you need quotas to break those down in the short term in order to create a more equal playing field for the longer term. But okay. That's what I think.
Nafez, where are you on quotas and on governance?
The conversation yesterday was, there was a very interesting conversation about the narratives of leadership, and I think it's absolutely right. There's a cultural issue that goes below the issue of governance per se. So I think that's something that needs to be addressed. On the issue of quotas, my own view is that there needs to be certainly governance and certainly proactive policies, but my own view would be targets rather than quotas.
I sense a hesitancy here, Navez.
Targets, because I mean, with quotas, I mean, if you have an aspiration to reach a certain target and develop policies to achieve that, it's better than, in my view, having a fixed number and say this will be our quota tomorrow.
So targets, not quotas. Okay, fair enough. Kanawata, do you believe in quotas?
As the example, what happened in my university, the quota is not the priority, but if we have the quota, that's great. Of course, that's part of our dream. However, there is more important thing than the quota. That's giving the opportunity. So that's more important. Although in our government, we have special minister for women role and children protection. Yeah, so that's...
Okay, thank you. We're going to have a democratic moment now. We've been hearing about, a couple of times yesterday, about quotas. We're going to take a straw poll. This is a non-binding, non-government straw poll. We're going to ask you to put your hands up in a moment if you think there should be a quota system for female participation, for the numbers of female vice-chancellors, female researchers in your country. Hands up if you think there should be a quota system. Oh, it's interesting. Okay, so I'm looking, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, about 12. I've got to say about 25% of the audience would say yes to a quota, which is quite interesting. I'm presuming then that 75% are saying no to a quota. So an interesting point of reflection. Okay. What we're going to do now is open this up to you. You've heard some views from the panel about governance, quotas, the mystery of the missing female researcher, where are they? You've heard some of the data around PhDs, progression from students, women participation, and now it's over to you if you have questions either on the research or on the panel, and there is a question just there. So if you could stand up, got a question there, and I've got a question there and there. So that one first. Right. Can you say who you are, please?
My name is Ananda. I'm from Sophia College in Mumbai. It's very obvious over the years that there is a correlation between top researchers and top leadership positions. I'd like to know why, because the skill set that is required for administration and for leading an institution and for research are not necessarily the same.
Well, I think that's almost the $64 million question, because there is this automatic assumption that gets made that if you're a skilled researcher, then you will become naturally a skilled administrator. And just as we make the assumption that if you're a skilled teacher, of course you will become a skilled head teacher. So, Lynn, why are we making these assumptions about research and therefore progression into higher leadership? Is it a sort of correlation that exists, or is it just a legacy issue?
I think it is a legacy issue because I think universities traditionally have been quite slow to change. I think that cultures within universities are very resilient to change, but they have had to change a lot in, relatively speaking, I think, due to globalization, due to lots of different factors. And I do think the corporatization of the university has made a much clearer delineation between the sort of the types of leaders that universities are now recruiting into, the types of leaders who will focus on funding streams for universities, the commercial aspects of universities. People need to be very well versed, as well as being a leader of the institution. They need to be very business focused in many countries. And I think that is defining a whole new skill set that perhaps leading researchers and academics don't have naturally, and they didn't go into research to do those kinds of things. So I think it's a very, very interesting debate, and I completely agree with you that those two things don't seem to be very, very compatible.
Nafaz, I'm going to come to you. Can I just ask you, first of all, before you respond to it, are there any Vice-Chancellors in the UK who are not academics?
I don't know offhand, to be perfectly honest. However, I think there's a fundamental problem issue here, because there is this, as you're saying, as Lynn's saying, a move towards commodification, corporatization of higher education. But I think it would be a mistake to then say what we need are essentially business-focused individuals as vice-chancellors.
Right.
I've seen it happen in my own career in institutions that were led by professionals, albeit with leadership training, management training, etc. Those institutions being changed such that it was felt that the chief executive didn't need to know the detailed knowledge of the organization. What that individual needed to know was how to run an organization. So the institution that I'm familiar with, the State Veterinary Service in the UK, was the Ministry of Agriculture. So previously it'd been led by the Chief Veterinary Officer, and that as a professional who knew in detail the purpose and function of the organization. Yeah. That was then changed, so you had the chief executive who was an accountant. Now, and the view of the government then was that it's better use of the CVO's time if he focused on his kind of day job of animal health rather than running the organization. I think that was a mistake because you ended up with a situation where the corporate structure didn't reflect what the function of the organization was. And universities, I think, will be making a mistake if they went down that route.
So it's a matter of validation then. You can't be the leader of an academic community unless you come from an academic background?
Yes, I mean, that would be my view.
Okay. Kalibata, where are you on this one? Do you think, we've got this wrong? Do you think, there is a natural progression to do with researchers and leadership? Do you have a view on this?
Yes, but it's not really like what we are talking about now. To be frankly, among the women leaders, we have quite serious discussions and thought. We are proud to be the female leader, but it is not because of we are female.
Yes.
So we proud because we are capable, we are competent. So the issue is more like how we can make more opportunity for the female to be competent. Yes, how to make female to be competent instead of to chase for the quota.
Yep.
So, and there is also another interesting discussion among university people and the industry. We have close relation with multinational industry like in oil and gas, like saffron, and then also British petroleum, Beyond Petroleum, that's from British, as well as Schlumberger. It is very interesting, they're encouraging the women to be the employee. So they make a campaign, goes to campus, to explain that being female is very welcome to work in the industry. So it means more like competency building instead of
positive role modeling.
Yes. Okay.
Excellent. So thank you. We had a question over there. So I'm going to ask that question and that question together because there are also a group of questions over here. So I'm going to do 2 for 1. So over there at that table, please. And then I'll come to you. I promise. I know, it's the lights. I can't see a thing.
I'm Anita Kurup from the National Institute of Advanced Studies. I'd like to draw the attention of the group to a study that NIAS and the Indian Academy of Sciences did on trained scientific women power, how much are we losing and why. And what particularly of interest for me in terms of the study was, it showed very clearly that women after a PhD are not a homogeneous group. We actually divided the women researchers into 3 types. Women researchers who continue with research, women researchers who are not in research institutions but are doing something similar to research in industry, and we looked at women researchers who are not working. And it's very important to understand that the perception of women researchers who are not working, they were very clear in terms of saying that they were not in a research career because they did not have an opportunity. It was not because they wanted to leave research as a career. It's extremely important that when you're looking at perceptions, in most of the rooms and discussions, you have women researchers who have active research careers, and their viewpoint is actually raised. Whereas the voices of women researchers who are not part of this group do not get their voices raised, and so their perceptions and their stories and narratives are very, very different. And it's extremely important that one notes that.
Right, I'm going to ask the panel about that in a moment. This lady down here, and then that lady over there, please. Hopefully the finger ended up in the right direction this time.
So to begin with, indeed, I'm thankful to Anita who made this comment, because this survey that she mentioned was a joint activity of the Indian Academy and NIAS, and I am the chair for the panel for women in science of the Indian Academy. Instead of questions, in fact, I wanted to make a few comments.
You can make a quick comment because we've got lots of questions to go. So quick comment.
No, but the reason I felt I wanted to make these comments because the 2 Indian panelists are not present here, and I do believe that this issue of researchers, women not going into research, has been recognized in India for over a period of 15 years. There are some national initiatives, and I would like to inform the people about it, so I think it's important, is that Department of Science and Technology in India has been running schemes for women not to leave, but to come back to science. And in the last 10 years, the number of women PIs, projects in number of women PIs, has grown by about a factor 8, from 200 to 1,600. So all said and done, such initiatives have worked. I am not a Department of Science and Technology person. I'm just a scientist who works on the cause. But the second point I wanted to make was actually reaching out to her, is that indeed we should, when we discuss this in the context of India, there are 2 important differences. One is that, as you correctly said, the research is concentrated in India in only research institutes and institutes of excellence, which are IITs and now IISER, that is Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research. But luckily, the data are too new and too few, but these institutions do have a larger number of young women faculty who are doing research. And there is a very proactive, as far as I know, a very proactive way in which people go about trying to increase the fraction of women faculty in these institutions.
Okay, got that. Thank you. We'll go to that question over there, please. And then I'm going to come back to you guys.
Thank you. My name is Pahi Saikia. I am from IIT Guwahati. And I wanted to raise at least 2 points and probably a question which comes up from those 2 points. I belong to northeastern part of India, which is probably all you know that it's ethnically diverse. Now in this whole discussion since yesterday, I felt somehow we have been missing the link between the discussion in this room and the groups that I work on, which is the indigenous, excluded indigenous, marginalized communities. Now, are we talking of quotas only of women, or are we totally excluding a group of women who are doubly jeopardized and marginalized that belong to ethnic, indigenous, minority, tribal communities in the entire northeastern part of India? And probably linked with this question, I would also want to raise that I'm not for or against quota, but I think it's very important for us because I'm talking of a huge section of the society within India, if you consider that to be a part of India, the northeastern part, and if we go by the policy of Indian government that you have to not only look east but act east, can we leave out these groups if we are to actually evolve with some developmental schemes? You know, education has been one of the major sectors. Because for these communities, it's first the security, physical and psychological security, primary education, which comes first, and then secondary education. I think higher education comes much, much later. So in this kind of a discussion, can we actually live out those communities or bring into the discussion later and at some point through a debate or, you know, for more work on marginalized ethnic communities? Thank you so much.
So what we've heard from those three sort of comments and questions is, one is there are programs that are working in India, and we acknowledge all of those, and there are programs in Pakistan and Nepal and Bangladesh that are also trying to tackle this. And I think what we're highlighting is the fact that no matter what those interventions are, it's almost like the scale and scope of the problem is accelerating faster than the interventions, because there's always a time lag between the intervention, the impact. So it's an issue to do with scale, scope, not that there aren't, you know, positive programs. And there is, of course, a more complex model in South Asia. However, there are some stark numbers, and those stark numbers are still there with the missing researchers. So we fully accept the point you're making. I think the question, though, that's emerging around here is, one is the issue around missing voices. Because there's an implication here that actually we're often only talking to the people we know, not all those who've dropped out. And the following link to that is, if you do quotas, is there a risk that actually you just do quotas for women and therefore you disenfranchise some of the marginalised groups? So the question I'm going to ask you coming back, and I'm starting with you, Lynn, because you're at that end and in my line of sight, is quotas, missing voices, is there a risk that if you go for a quota system, actually, rather than accelerate a solution, you create other wider problems?
I think quotas are very controversial, but I do think that, you know, there are countries around the world, I think Sweden is one of them recently, who have just re-established quotas, for example, in the business sector for women, because targets weren't being reached, and they haven't been reached for a long, long time. They've had them in there for decades. And they finally decided to put in quotas. Yep. And so I think that looking at the business sector, I don't know enough about that to be able to make sort of very distinct sort of parallels between higher education and the corporate world, but I think it's worth looking at the corporate world where they've been grappling with this problem for a long time. And I think that you know, in some of our countries, particularly India, quotas are highly controversial. They've been in place for quite a long time, and again, we can learn from that. And you know, there are a lot more people in the audience, I think, who understand the sort of the implications of quotas in the countries and the cultures that are here present. So, on the issue of missing voices, I agree that that is absolutely crucial. And I really come back to what we were talking about yesterday, about data. Because that piece of research is very important. And I think without the right data, looking across sort of different cultures, communities, different types of institutions, private institutions, public institutions, colleges, across, starting from the school sector actually, that we won't get to the nub of the issues and be able to find sort of relevant solutions that are going to be sustainable. So I do think that we need to know more. And pieces of research like this one are absolutely critical.
Okay, I'm going to
to
pause
this
there.
debate.
I'm going to take just these last three questions. I'll hear them, and then we'll make a final comment. So we've got a question there on the front table, a question there on the third table, and two questions. So can we get the microphone to there, please? Because I'm getting all these signals saying you're out of time, Peter. Hurry up.
I'm Preeti Joshi from the University of Delhi. So we have been talking about quota and the massification of education. So I want to know, how do other countries, how do they prepare their professors to deal with this diversity in the classroom?
Okay.
Because I grapple with it every day.
How do you prepare professors for diversity in the classroom? That's one question. Second question, just behind you, please. And then I'm coming.
Hi, I'm Pearl, and my question is, when you're talking about equality, equity, and parity, then where is the question of quota here? Because I think we need to change the mindset of the society, that I think it's like inferior in itself that we are settling for second best. When we are fighting with the other gender shoulder to shoulder and ears to ears, why are we getting second best? Why quotas? I think we should be empowered and become competent to fight it out.
Okay, so it's a mindset issue, and this is the final question, just coming here before we wrap up.
Hi, I'm Bulbul Dhar from Jamia University in Delhi. And this is an issue which came up yesterday also, and I think patriarchy is something we really need to grapple with. Mindset change here, and it's an issue of governance too, because we're looking at quantity in terms of education, but not quality. So what's the quality education? And there's been a program, because there are no panelists from India, I would like to tell the audience a large program by the UGC called the Capacity Building for Women Managers in Higher Education, which is taking issues like women's studies perspective across disciplines. And that's made a major difference to a lot of women coming up who, the whole issue. So women's studies perspective, women in governance, women in academic leadership, personal and professional roles, which is a very significant thing because you need that balancing, and women in research. So that's really brought out a whole lot of things. But I'd also like to make the connect with research and teaching when you're talking about, there's no difference in India in the larger, in the University Grants Commission kind of system that we have, because you inevitably have to do a doctorate or be net qualified, which is the national education test for it, to actually get into teaching and be upgraded. So it goes side by side. But after that, it's like Professor Aloka said yesterday, it's the bulge at the waist. Sure. It does not, the glass ceiling is there, it does not really go. So are there governance issues and policy changes which we can introduce, bottom up somewhere along the line?
I'm going to use the chairman's prerogative to ask a totally different question, because we've put those questions out there and they're going to form part of a wider debate this morning, this afternoon. My final question linking to the panel is just a quick comment. Bearing in mind what we said is, there is an issue to do with female researchers, the progression. That progression is inhibiting women from going on to leadership role models. We've heard from Louise's research yesterday. We've heard from many other colleagues. If you could do one thing to actually improve the situation, to effect a change, and you're not allowed a quote, I'm barring that one, what one thing do you think that could be done that would significantly improve the situation? I've got three very worried-looking panelists at the moment thinking, why did he save that till the end? Okay, and of course, Lynn, you're in my line of sight, which is a real pity sitting in the corner. You get to go first. What one thing?
To choose one thing out of the sort of the multitude of things that need to change for this to be, for this issue to be sort of addressed adequately, I would say, if there was one thing, I agree with the person who mentioned government policy and initiatives. I think a sort of government policy in each of our countries to put in place leadership training and awareness raising of the opportunities for women as they're coming through the system, I think would be very useful.
So, government policy intervention. Naviz, what one thing would you choose? Because it's not going to be quotas for you, I know.
It's not going to be quotas, but it's going to be organisational culture. Now, universities and higher research institutions are organisations. You would have thought that, given the kinds of people that go into research, that they could be a microcosm of wider changes in society. So have tools, develop tools, have things in place to change organisational cultures.
Okay. Kanawati, you get the last word on this.
Right. I would prefer to do the acceleration of process for capacity development for the female empowerment. That's the easiest way is through the university, because that's directly under my control, and then we work together with the community in order to avoid the missing voices. So that's the priority. Also, we have to work with the government and the industry, but the easiest is with the university and community.
Within the community. So colleagues, just to draw this to a conclusion, first of all, I'd like you to thank the panel. And secondly, just to summarize up, there is a flaw in our system. The flaw, quite simply, is that it cannot be a system that actually denies access through a range of structures to women to reach the leadership roles in our universities. Not only is it a business failure, not only is it an academic failure, not only is it a cultural failure, it is fundamentally a talent failure. If we want our universities to be high-performing institutions to reflect their communities, then 40% is the very minimum of vice-chancellors, 40% is the very minimum of senior researchers, and 40% should be the bar for all university professors of gender. So there is a challenge, and the question is, what are we going to do about it? Please enjoy your coffee as we take a break till 11 o'clock. Thank you very much.